When considering the legacy of somewhat forgotten presidents, sometimes we see their marks left behind in unexpected places. In the case of William Taft, one of the most visible reminders of his political career came about through the actions of his wife Helen Taft, who often went by Nellie. I'm referring to the Japanese cherry trees of Washington, D.C., celebrated in the National Cherry Blossom Festival each year at the start of spring. The trees are a yearly tourist draw, but owe their planting to the advocacy of Nellie, who worked to institute a plan to plant Japanese cherry trees along the tidal basin beginning in 1910. The initial idea for improving the area was sparked by Mrs. Taft's love of the promenades in Manila and the desire to create something similar in Washington. But it was also the first major project undertaken by a First Lady, setting a precedent for years to come. There were some initial difficulties, with much of the first batch of trees having to be burned due to an insect infestation. But thousands of additional trees were donated by Japan, and before long the trees began to thrive. Nearly any significant discussion of Washington's cherry trees will reference the role of Nellie Taft. Far less rarely mentioned, but no less important, is the relationship William Taft had already developed with Japanese officials over the course of multiple visits and diplomatic interactions with the nation. While serving as governor of the Philippines and then Secretary of War, Taft was tasked with traveling to Japan in 1905, where he was well received and laid the diplomatic groundwork for President Roosevelt to mediate the peace between Russia and Japan at the end of the Russo-Japanese War. This was only the first of several trips Taft made to Japan, and marked the beginning of long-term admiration between Taft and the rulers of Japan. We see this in news reports of diplomatic relations between the two nations, in Taft taking the role as principal speaker at the Panama Pacific Exposition on Japan Day, on his brother Henry's election as president of the Japan Society in 1922, and of course in the yearly celebration of the cherry trees that his wife had planted. Sometimes history, such as the long tradition of cherry trees in Washington, D.C., seems like a local matter. But in this case, it harkens back to an era of deliberately positive diplomacy between the United States and the nation of Japan. This relationship would be broken only decades later in the turmoil of World War II, but the cherry trees can still be seen as a reminder of women and men like the Tafts and their friends in Japan who saw the possibility of peace and friendship and worked to sustain it. Thank you.